On today's show, we're going to discuss the topic CNC machinery, computer numeric control, which is taking over a lot of the common tasks that we used to do with hand tools and repeating them hundreds of times, like spray painting and welding and router cutting. And also, we're going to discuss that new emerging tech art form, lithography. And who better than our guest today, Mr. Dan Rich from the original Oregon company. And he's a holder of many patents, world recognized for his innovations, and he is going to be discussing that here today as our guest, and you'll hear that in just a few seconds.
Awesome song. I love that song. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to I Love My Tools, the radio show here on AmericanPatriotRadio.com. And I am your host for this evening. This is Mike DeZinno, America's Blind Tradesman. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening and our guest this evening. Each week, as you know, we do what we do here. We celebrate the tradespeople and the blue-collar workers of America, the people who built this nation and keep it running behind the scenes every day. No thanks, just pay them at the end of the week. We are going to be discussing some of those issues tonight that are really important to the working American. And as you are out there working on your slice of the American dream for you and your family, there's important things we need to share amongst ourselves. We got to support each other here. Now, we're going to also talk about the fun side of the blue-collar or trade culture. It's a lot of fun. You're going to find that out tonight because I have a great guest lined up for you tonight, and we're going to have a lot of fun here. And, of course, there is the serious side to our trades, and that's when you buckle down, get to work, and get it done. Because you know what? In the blue-collar world of the trades, there is no excuse. It's either done or it's not. There's no halfway point. And it's either done well or it's not. There's no percentages there. And the people who take pride in what they do are the people who built the reputation of this country for excellence. For myself speaking, I've said this before, the trades have been really good to me. And they have given me a life that most people will never live to have, especially people in my circumstances being a member of the disabled community. And that's why I say, over and over again, the great equalizer and the fairest place to be is in the trades. Because if you've got the skills and you've got the work ethic, they need you. And they don't care what you bring in your private life. You just don't bring it to the job. You get the job done. That's what it's all about. Matter of fact, I have recollections with tools in my hand as young as 3 years old until this very day. Matter of fact, today I was in the workshop working on some prototype stuff for my little R&D company. That's why I'm excited about tonight's guest, because he's a kindred spirit and does a lot of similar kind of things that I do in a different realm, but for the same reasons. Can you push the envelope? What else can we invent? What else can we innovate? Innovation, big word. It's what built this country. So, like I say, it's all been real good to me, and I'm hoping for those of you who have chosen the trades as your life path, it's being good to you too. Matter of fact, let me just share something here, because I do this on every show, and I'm going to do it tonight. Here's the actual stats. The majority of the people going into the trades at age 18 in a 50-year work career to age 68, which is the current retirement age, will out-earn most of the people who go to college. Isn't that something? Especially when you consider that only 26% of the population go to college, half of them don't graduate, and the remaining 13% who do graduate of our population, 92% of them can't find a job in what they have that piece of paper saying they can do hanging on the wall in their office bedroom briefcase or glove compartment as they walk around, schlepping around looking for a job. Tonight's topic is jobs coming back to America. All the candidates are saying that. They're promising it. They're all talking a good game, but are they going to deliver? My guest and I are going to discuss that tonight. Because are you going to be ready for that? What's going to be the impact of automation upon your job and higher level skills needed to hold down those great high-paying jobs they're promising? That has been a continuing theme here on I Love My Tools, and maybe even moving on to being self-employed in the trade. We're going to be giving some tips here on some things that you can do. Get yourself prepared, and maybe if you're a parent of one of those young people just starting out in their work career, or you got one of those basement dwellers who can't find a job and they're approaching the age of Peter Pan down in your basement, maybe it's time you take heed to a few things we share here, because you might be able to give them a new direction in life and save them from a life of underemployment. Okay. I'm going to introduce our guest right now, but before I do that, I just want to say one more thing here. If you have any questions, go to questions@ilovemytools.com. Comments, go to comments@ilovemytools.com. And while you're up at the website, ilovemytools.com, become a member of the crew. Join us. Participate. We've got some great stuff that only crew members can get from us. The other thing is up on Facebook, like us, Twitter. Click on our homepage there. You can communicate with us through Twitter, through Facebook, and you'll be plugged into the loop and you'll know what's going on. Okay, tonight I have a very special guest because this is not only somebody that got it on the ball and I consider a valuable resource for when I need some mentoring and when I need to work through some issues and things, but also somebody who is a kindred spirit of innovation and development. I have on the phone with me this evening Mr. Daniel Rich from the great state of Oregon, the founder and current president of the original Oregon Company. They are an innovative, state-of-the-art company. He holds a number of patents in some of these innovations. We will discuss that tonight. But he's made some major revelations, and it is my great pleasure to introduce my good friend, Daniel. Dan, how you doing?
Great, Mike. How are you?
Fine, thank you. First, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I know as most entrepreneurs, you're not just hanging around on a Friday night. So I do appreciate you sharing this time with us.
Every day is a Monday when you're an inventor or entrepreneur. You know, when you're not performing a job, you're looking for a job. Life isn't as 9 to 5 when you work for yourself.
It's interesting you say that because when I was 27 or 28 years old, I met a man that was worth $80 million. And I was so impressed with him. I took a job for him for a week. And I wouldn't even accept pay. I just wanted to be around him because I had been working on trying to make my first million, and I think I had less than $100 in the bank after 7 years or 8 years of trying. And I just asked him one day, I said, "They say you're worth $80 million, Mr. So-and-so." And he said, "Folks say a lot of things." And I asked him, "How'd you make that $80 million?" And he just laughed and he said, "You really want to know how I made it?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "You really, really want to know how I made it?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he pulled me to his face, nose to nose, and said, "Here's my secret. I earned my living from 9 to 5, and I made my fortune from 5 to midnight, Saturdays and holidays."
That's right. That is tremendously correct.
Because if you're an entrepreneur, it never leaves your heart. It's in your brain. It's in your soul. You're eating a sandwich, and all of a sudden, the slice of tomato looks like the new cog gear you got to put in the machine to make it faster.
That's right. Innovation doesn't make you anything. Invention makes you something. Innovation drives you broke until you complete it and you have an invention. So
yeah.
I totally understand what he's saying. 9 to 5 pays the bills, and 5 to midnight, that gets you ahead.
But it's fun. See, people who have a job that is just drudgery, a place where they hate to go every Monday morning. Matter of fact, you know, that is so prevalent that 85% of the people, actual statistics here, 85% of the people have a job that they didn't even pick for themselves. Somebody else got it for them. Somebody else said, "Hey, they're hiring down where I work. Well, you ought to come down and put an application." And they begrudgingly put in an application. They're not doing what they want to do. And the statistic that supports that they're unhappy. The greatest time for heart attacks, fatal heart attacks, is Monday morning before 9 o'clock in the morning, like 6 a.m. till 9 during that Monday morning rush. That's the greatest block of time when people die of heart attacks than any other time slot in the week. Amazing. You notice they don't die on Friday night while partying. Well, most
That's
of them
right.
do. Some do.
They didn't die as they collected their check on Friday night, standing in the bank line to cash it. No. It's Monday morning.
They died on their way to that job they hate.
That's
the
right.
Stress has been building on them since 10 a.m. Sunday morning in church when they realized, "Oh my God, tomorrow I got to go back to work." And they just hate it. And they just work themselves up into a life-killing frenzy. Got to find something, folks, that you love to do, and then do that to excess instead of find something you hate to do and hate it to excess. That's not the way life is supposed to be.
Exactly.
I want to talk about your past because you're a kindred spirit. And I think that's why we became friends years ago, because we have so many parallel interests. Share a little bit about your younger days. You know, were you one of those kids that always had tools in your hand? I know you did military service. And how did you come to be the cool guy you are today?
Well, I was one of them people that couldn't afford to pay other people to make my life easier. The only way I could make my life easier was to do it for myself. If I had a bicycle that was broke, I couldn't take to the shop. I had to fix it myself. If I had a tire that was flat, I couldn't take and go get another tire. I had to take it apart and make my own little rubber patch out of leftover, rubber and glue and put her back together, Then I got into, bigger projects, more complex things, and pretty soon it caught on that I actually was interested in the way that things functioned, and not really the way that things functioned, but why they functioned. You can teach somebody how to do something, but the person who knows how will always work for the person that knows why. And what I mean by that is that you can teach someone how to take and fix a circuit board. He clips a little checker onto there, looks at the needle comes up, he says, oh, this is a bad part. So he takes out that part, puts a new part in there. Okay, that's the how. He fixed it. But if you ask him, well, why does this diode go ahead of that transistor? Why does the electricity go this direction through the circuit board? And he doesn't know why, he just knows the how. Well, sometimes when you're fixing stuff, the how isn't working for you, and you're dead in the water. Well, if you're a why person and you know the why things work, well, then you can invent the how. You're not dead in the water. If the how isn't working, you just make a different how, because you know why it works. So for me, I always needed to know why things worked. The how was really easy.
Mm-hmm. That's akin to many of the innovations I make that allowed me as a blind person to work in 13 different trades in my life and earn a living and put food on the table at every one of those trades. And in several of those trades excelled to the point where I built multi-million-dollar companies in those trades, same principle.
You needed to know why tools worked because you couldn't see the how. You needed to know the why, and then you invented the how to work for you in the method that you used, which was a non-sided trades.
Hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right. There's a chicken and an egg and a chicken, and you got to keep the order straight, and you're constantly pinging and ponging back and forth between the two. Your military career, because that was some interesting stuff for you, what you did in the military and what you learned there and how you took that into your work career. And Dan, in the early days, what were you doing after the military? Were you self-employed right away? Did you work for someone else? How did you transition into being an entrepreneur?
In the military, I did avionics, electronics, and communications in the Marine Corps, and before I was 21 years old, I had been in more foreign countries than I was years old, flown into destinations that I didn't know where it was. I just know the plane or the chopper sat down, you climb out, you're escorted to a location, you do your job, you take and climb back in, and they fly you to the next place, So there's been situations like that. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I was told that, oh, well, all the equipment that you worked on in the Marine Corps, all the radios, multi-channel, multi-frequency, microwave, all the things that you worked on, well, they're classified equipment, and we don't use those in the civilian world. So you're taken, you have the opportunity to get a civilian job being a mobile telephone operator. And I said, I went through all this training in the Marine Corps. They flew me. I had a top secret, status. They'd fly me to a location. I would do my job, fly out, and now my job is to say, number, please? No, this didn't work for me. So I basically had to start over with the determination that what I had assembled in my own skill set, I needed to use in the civilian world. I still had to take in. I didn't have disability. I wasn't broken because of the Marine Corps. I didn't have retirement. I wasn't in there for 40 years, so I had to use what I had, my brain. I had to take my skill set that I had. I had a very specialized skill set, actually a couple of them. Some of them I can't use in the civilian world, but the ones that I could, I took and formulated a plan to use them and adapt them innovatively to the things that were out here. So to start out with, I took and went to work taking as heating and air conditioning environmental controls, because I could rewire and reprogram environmental controls for large buildings. I did that for a while. I took and innovated starting my own businesses. None of them made a lot of money. They paid the bills. They kept the frying pan, from coming down on your noggin, but they weren't going to make you rich, So at some point or another, I had to look to bigger goals than just paying my bills. And that's kind of, what you need to do. People need to look at the goals that take care of their local needs, but their local needs just pay the day-to-day bills, keep the lights on, food in the refrigerator. And if you're happy with that, it's an awesome life, But if you're not happy with that, if you have bigger goals than that, then you need to take and work on getting larger quantitative amounts of money. And that's where you need to innovate the process. You need to take and make money without so much labor involved in it. And that's what society is doing today. Society is taking and automating things.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because that's about the time I met you and I was hearing some of your frustrations because you had a company that was very successful, a very specialized skill company that you had for many, many years. Half of the existence of the company, you were the head of that company and the owner. And that company made prototypes for rolling chassis for prototype cars, electric cars and everything else. And that was everything from the chassis to how did the doors open and close? How did the windows fit in? How did this happen? How did that happen? All these bodies that had to be custom made, and it involved welding aluminum and cutting titanium and doing this and doing that and solving all these issues with all the various components you had to put together a rolling chassis so somebody could come along and stick an electric motor in it or put leather seats in it or whatever they wanted to do to finish it, the kind of glass they wanted or whatever. Matter of fact, you even put up a camera on the internet where clients could look and see their work in progress in what I used to call the Leonardo da Vinci workshop because of all of this innovation you had going. I used to hear your frustration because you had all these skills that you had taught yourself, and you were having a problem hiring somebody who had your skills and who, quite frankly, there's no other way to say it, but who gave a damn about the quality of the work being produced. It wasn't that easy to duplicate Dan in Dan's own business. I had similar problems with some of my companies. I'll tell you what, Dan, I really want to pursue that point. I think what we'll do is we'll take a little 3-minute break right now so I can drink something, rest my voice. I've got something special that I'm playing just for you because it makes this point that we're talking about right now.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You are listening to an episode of I Love My Tools, the radio show, with your show host, Mike DeZinno, America's blind tradesman. And now, let's get back to the show.
All right. Now, I know that was funny math, but that brings us to the next point. What Dan found out in his ventures trying to staff his companies and what led him to tonight's topic about a little more automation and what really drove him toward the industry of CNC and automating processes. It's a sad commentary, but the state of education in this country and a few other things that go on in this country, we are not creating a generation of productive people to follow the innovators. And all these presidential candidates, they're talking about bringing stuff back to this country. They're bringing back industries. They're bringing back work that needs to be done. They're not bringing back jobs. Those jobs will be created by the people like Dan and myself who are looking for the people who can control functions and processes and things, not people who have screwed up math and can't understand basic instructions. With having said those comments, I'm going to turn this over to Dan for his thoughts on that topic.
Well, a long time ago when I was in charge of hiring and firing people for one of the companies, that I worked, a good person above me told me, if you need more employees, just hire some. I said, well, there's not employees around that are skilled or trained to do what we do. We do a specialized function. We use specialized equipment. He says, just hire a few people. I said, there's no trained people out there. He says, good guys are a dime a dozen. Here's a quarter. Go through a few. And the analogy of the situation is keep hiring and firing until you find somebody. But what I tried to tell him is when you're making one-of-a-kind things, there's no if you haven't done it before, there's no training. You need to get the on-the-job training as it is. It's not like you're working a molder in a factory where you are actually the loading widget for the chain that sends the wood or product into the molder, because they don't have a 6-axis robot that's automated to load the machine automatically for them. They use human people, like in lumber companies to take and load molding machines or finger joint machines, and that's the point of this whole conversation is there are not going to be jobs brought back to America that require unskilled labor. They're going to bring jobs back that are fulfilled and performed by machinery, by automation. The only function that an employee is going to have is they're going to need to be a talented machine operator or machine programmer. And they're going to have to be a little more talented than they were back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And an example of that is a very talented person could run a backhoe or a grader or something like that, on a job site. But now with automation happening, these things are all done by GPS and computerized programming. They're all done with computerized numerical code. They're not done with just, you grab this stick and you move it left and right and the machine goes left and right. It's all done it automatically, like Google cars drive themselves, and this is where America is going to go to take in, bring back jobs, is you need to bring back quantities. You need to have stuff happen automatedly so that you can get up your, quotient rate of production. You can't do this all by hand anymore. There isn't going to be people with a chisel and a hammer and, these jobs are going away.
When you were just talking now, something occurred to me. As an entrepreneur and as a business owner, and we can talk more about this in the next section where we talk about becoming an entrepreneur and moving up to the next level. But one of the big things you always deal with is your company scalable? And the answer to that today is not the traditional answer that it had always been in the past, where you just double the size of your building and hire twice as many people, and now you're twice the size of a company. Today, if you're scalable, it's also, are the skills of your people scalable? Because somebody comes in at some entry level and does exactly what you said, and is a decent machine operator and has some innovation and can do some things and can understand, but will that person grow into the realization or the greater skill of, could that person manage 15 people doing what that person's been doing the last 5 years and make sure they come along so that they're scalable, they continue to grow, they continue to evolve. It's almost like, besides innovating the process and innovating the product, you have to also innovate the labor force constantly so that they are constantly changing. They're saying today, in the old days, our grandparents, you went to work for a factory at 17, 18 years old. You retired from there at 65. The same factory. That's not the case anymore. They're saying that the average person today, young person today, entering the job market in their life may have as many as 5 to 8 separate careers.
Do you know why that is? Do you know why that is? That is because they say you get a job to find out if you like doing something. Generally, you'll change that job to a second job because you will have done this and you'll say, well, I might like to do this other thing a little bit more. So then you'll change that second job to a third job because you've refined your skills. The fourth job is you've learned that you now have refined skills, so you take and move to the next job to take and get more money for the skills that you have refined. And then the last time that they say you do it is you take your refined skills for the right amount of money and you do it in a location you want to do it at. So your jobs have to evolve along with evolution of your life. If you don't want to work in the back alley of somebody's body shop all your life, then you start in the back alley, then you take and you get a little bit better job out in the front street doing the same thing. And then once they realize you can fix the car even better. You move to the dealership. Once you've gotten to the dealership, you step up the ladder and become the service writer, make a little bit more money, and then you finally work in the dealership service writing in Hawaii, So at some point or another, you definitely go through multiple jobs. You don't hold the same job your whole life like you used to.
That's further compounded by a sociological thing going where a lot of the jobs people do start that path on don't exist 10 or 15 years down the road. I mean, who would have ever thought the vinyl record industry would start, boom, and disappear in 8 years? Cassette tapes, things like that. Everything is moving so quickly that a lot of the stuff that people start out as a career is only because the innovation hasn't happened yet. And are you working with a company that's going to have the innovation? Because you may start out with a company that may not even exist next week. And the newer company that evolves, the one that takes all the marbles off the table in your local area, your county, your state, or the region of the country you live in, that company, if it's really innovating and growing, it's doing 10 times more with half as many people. And that's the other side of that. So it becomes a very vicious cycle. It's this constant, you have to keep working on yourself if you're going to fit into the new industrial world of technology and the trades or anything else. I look at the stuff I had to learn over the years. Everybody thinks, well, carpenter works with wood. Yeah, well, today, carpenters work with a lot of other different materials other than wood, and so do people in the HVAC, heating, air conditioning, and ventilation, HVAC controls and stuff like you were saying. Some of this stuff is automated, becomes specialized, like doctors. You have doctors that specialize in ears now and nose and throat, and there was once a doctor that did all three. Well, the same thing is all the industries, too. You become really specialized in what you're going to do, and is what you chose to become specialized in, is that going to be the survivor? Or are you the guy who figured out how to do an engine job on an Etzel? And then
right,
Etzel disappeared one day.
Yep.
And now
are you
around.
The very best knife sharpeners there are, but now they make knives that don't need sharpening.
Yeah, exactly. Or the self-sharp. Yeah, exactly. That you can get on TV infomercials at 2 in the morning.
Exactly.
When you're thinking of committing mayhem because you hate your job, you're going to in the morning.
Exactly.
I always thought that was strange that, on Sunday night they have all those infomercials selling all those lethal things. I'm going, this is not good for the workplace on Monday. Anyway, we're only kidding, folks. We're only kidding. That it's not an endorsement to workplace violence. Okay, we do have our humor here. So I was thinking that you have to have people who are scalable so that your company can scale. The other thing, too, is you brought out another point. Do you really want to lose somebody that you've invested a lot of time in? When I say a lot of time, time is a resource. Time and money and training and putting up with their mistakes. Well, you're growing them to be an effective employee. Ross Perot had a guy one day who made a $10,000 mistake and somehow or another became public news, and a reporter asked Mr. Perot, are you going to fire that guy? And Ross Perot said, no. And the guy said, why not? And he said, why would I fire him? I just paid $10,000 for his education. I'm going to keep that guy. And I think of my own case. Truth be known, I made mega millions. I lost a good percentage of those mega millions, got to hang on to more than most, which is most entrepreneurs' stories. Just in mistakes, I probably have paid the equivalent of 131 PhDs in stupidity before I figured out what worked and what didn't work. So why would I fire myself? I'm pretty skilled now, because part of knowing what works, that's okay. But sometimes the bigger knowledge is knowing what won't work and stop wasting your time going down that road. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things you were talking about, but even some of the situations you had with the company that you just recently sold with work ethic. What are you finding out there in the job place with work ethic? Another topic I'm very strong on with the parents saying, come on, stop training your kids to be lazy, self-centered narcissists and teach them a little bit about being team players and with a work ethic. Well, what are your feelings on that?
I don't know. America has changed so much since I, refined my work ethic. Nowadays people want to get paid to do the least amount of something they can, and they really don't see a lot of pride in the product that they create because they show a lot of pride in the product they create. They get just as much pay as if they don't show a lot of pride. So why should they care if it's, if it's right or if it's wrong? I work for somebody who wants 1,000 units a day. Okay, well, I don't care if there's 1,000 correct units. I get paid the same amount of money. I just want that 1,000 units out the door so that I get my pay. That's the wrong work ethic, but there's too many people that just do their job for the money. They don't care about, the quality of the things that they produce. And some of that is due to, the escalation of we want production. We don't want to take and pay for quality. Quality costs us too much. We want low dollar. We want production. We want you to get this many units out the door. And I just never abode by that, feeling. That's why I went to making one of a kind things that I could take and command whatever money I needed for the one of a kind, rather than sit there and make 20,000 widgets, So at some point or another, you need to take and feel comfortable where you work, but you don't want to sacrifice your work ethic just for your job, because then pretty soon you don't care about what you're doing, and that doesn't lead you down the road of satisfaction in your life.
Something you just touched on, finding the better market to go into where the competition is smaller. Because if you get into a production type of competition, then it's about only one thing, price. If you find yourself working in an industry where quality no longer matters, then the only game you can compete on is price. That's a losing proposition. There's a great book that explains that principle. It's called Blue Ocean Strategies. Great business book. A gentleman turned me on to it who was the CEO of a little company that for $9.5 million outmaneuvered Microsoft, who put almost $1 billion into the same project, and it was absolutely amazing. I'm going to share that story when we do a mentoring class for some of the members of the crew that we're going to be doing over at ilovemytools.com. So for those of you who want to go over there and join the crew, please do so, because we've got some great stuff to share with you. But the premise of the book is very simple. Stop having a knife fight in a trench. Stop trying to float your boat in an ocean that's red with blood from having to kill your competition and them trying to kill you. Death by 1,000 cuts of slow bleeding you to death. Sail out to the blue water where you have what Jack Welch calls differentiation, where what you do is unique and it is not where your competition is what drives you. What drives you is your own success. That's what should be driving you. Having said that, I've got something here I want to play for you. This brings up our next point, Dan. And right after this, we'll be back. You're listening to American Patriot Radio, I Love My Tools, the radio show.
You are listening to I Love My Tools, the radio show, with your host, Mike DeZinno, America's Blind Tradesman. And now, back to the show.
There's a point between that and the previous track with Lou Costello trying to prove to his landlord that his numbers work better than the landlord's numbers. For 7 weeks of rent at $13 a week, being more than $28. This is part of what it's going to take to plug into this new world. Our children today, and when I say children, because of my age, perhaps I should clarify myself. I'm probably noticing this in people 30, 35 years old and less. Terrible, absolutely pathetic math skills. But worse than their math skills are their communication skills. And the kids today are absolutely terrible. And the actual statistics are the average high school graduate in 1968 had a vocabulary of around 25 to 26,000 words. Today, they're graduating high school with a vocabulary of around 84 to 8,600 words, 1/3 as many words. They can't express themselves. And you see it all the time on these man-on-the-street interviews that they do on TV on college campuses. They use the wrong word. They don't use the proper part of speech, and they can't explain any concepts. And that's what you saw right there, with total breakdown in communication. And if you're going to be one of those scalable, system-oriented employees, you're going to be able to have to read, comprehend what you read, understand what you've been told, execute orders, and be able to pass that information on to other people if you're going to be able to even be promotable and you're scalable to a higher level job in your own industry. And having said that, that's what I wanted to get Dan's thoughts on, because here's what I found. Those who learn, earn. Those who won't, don't. And those who don't learn, don't earn. And it's that simple. That's the new world we're coming into.
Well, that's exactly right. At some point or another, you need to keep up with the world, or the world will, run you over. If there's technologies that affect your life, then you need to know how to command those technologies, even if it's the computer, or the car. A long time ago, people said, well, I don't need a car. If I want to talk to somebody, I'll take and saddle the horse and I'll ride on over there. You get them their first car. You can't pry that car out of their hands. Same thing with the cell phone. No, I don't need a cell phone. I'll go in the house and I'll call. You give people that cell phone, and now, there's no way they're going to leave without it. Well, the world is evolving. It's becoming more productive. It's becoming more efficient. This leads to profit, so that's why people are doing a lot of things on the run, mobile apps on their phone versus waiting until they get home and do things. So you really do need to keep up with technology in your life, but also, if you want your life to take and have a better quality to it, you need to keep up with that in your workplace, because that's where your wages will go higher.
Along with that, I would add, again, work ethic. And we're robbing our children today out of the joy of personal accomplishment and knowing what work ethic is and what it leads to with that sense of worth, personal self-worth. We're just not plugging them into a system that wins. I want you to mention that you were a Marine, which you did do, and thank you for your service. It's no small surprise that I believe it's 80% of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 corporations are all former United States Marines. Parents, you catching on? The discipline didn't hurt them, okay? It improved their lives, okay? They're some of the top paid people in the country right now. It's the way to go, and have those kids work right alongside you and hold them accountable. If you need their help for an hour, you make them put in that full hour. You're not hurting them. You're not punishing them. And you're not abusing them. You're not mistreating them. You're getting them ready to be an adult. You teach them personal responsibility, and you will raise your children with an edge far and above the other people in their peer group. Just put the tools in their hands. And yes, I know you can do it faster, and you could probably do it better. But then you've taught them nothing. Watch the pride when they accomplish something. And you'll find them sneaking over to the window and looking out at the backyard where they helped you or whatever. You'll find them sneaking into the room where they held the other end while you put the shelf up or whatever. They put in a few screws themselves. It's a good thing. It's a very good thing for them to know, to learn that work ethic and to have those skills. How complicated is it? We're going to talk about CNC machinery here because you had to go that way to make up for the skill you couldn't find. How complicated is it to teach somebody some basic CNC skill? Let me define what CNC is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. CNC just means Computerized Numerical Control. In plain words, it's a computer running the tool that's doing the work, whether it's a welder or a cutter or a shaper or whatever. It just means it's a computer running it over the material.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, and it could be anything from a laser if you're doing engraving or cutting to a plasma cutter or a welding tip or a wood shaper or even a paintbrush, a painting device, a squirt nozzle. Most people have seen the old industrial robots. I mean, they're old now. They're, 35, 40 years ago. Ford had them in the assembly line for spray painting primer and stuff.
Cars these days have it in them themselves. You don't think about it that way, and they don't talk about it that way, but cars have CNCs inside of them right now, except for it's not numerical control, it's navigated control, computer navigated control. This is what happens when your car backs itself up into its parking spot. Mm-hmm. Your car realizes where its origin point is, your car realizes where its destination is, and your car navigates from point A to point B.
Yeah, with a pre-programmed set of choices that it makes depending upon which choice in a microsecond moves it towards its goal from point A to point B. Yeah,
else.
Wrong, correct.
If, then, else. If this happens, then do that. If that isn't the answer, else do something. If, then, else, and so programming a computer is along the same lines, it's just a matter of choices and never leading yourself to a dead end, always having an option, a choice, a something to continue on.
There was a famous experiment with a portable robot, one of the early generations done out at Stanford, and they were blown away when they wrote the software and everything else. and the robot, they were trying to give it a problem to solve, and they taught a robot some basic things, how to traverse up an incline with wheels. Actually didn't really walk as we understand it to be. And they taught it to move a box across a horizontal plane and all that. And then they were trying to figure out how to teach it to lift something, to put it up on a table. And something happened that they did not expect in the programming. The robot said to itself, "That's the hard way." The robot went over, got the ramp, put it next to the table, and pushed the box up the ramp onto the table. And they were like dumbfounded because it was not programmed to do that, but through its own set of choices, it figured out that was its best amount of production for the least amount of effort.
Well, exactly. That's where the evolution of three rights makes a left came in.
Yeah.
Because you have limited movement. How do you go left if you can only turn right? Well, three rights make a left. So it's that evolution of options that you take and provide the machinery. This is where talented operators will come in, because when you automate things, machines have limited functions. It's the operator who needs to innovatively program the machine through the limited functions the machine has to perform the task that's required. This is where the jobs will be in America, are in talented operators, not in functional jobs. Machines will do the jobs.
Right. And one of the things we saw out on the job sites in the trades that was on point with this as generations went on, I've had apprentices working for me in the summertime in my construction companies and everything else over the years, going all the way back, probably starting in 1968 part-time, and when I became self-employed at full-time in the early 70s, ever since then, I've always had an apprentice or an intern or something. And I've watched over the years how that critical thinking skill diminished to where they will walk somewhere empty-handed, right past something they need, and then go back to get it later when they need it, rather than think ahead 5 minutes and make an efficiency movement. I was talking to a buddy of mine who will be here also in a couple of weeks on a particular topic that he's an expert on, and we used to laugh about, we'd be up on a roof and stuff in the old days of doing roofing. You did not leave the roof unless you had reached a point where you didn't leave any material up there or something, and then you went down to the ground to get something to drink and hit the head, and when you came back up the ladder, you did not come up empty-handed. I don't care whether you brought a bag of nails, a couple of tubes of blackjack, another bundle of shingles on your shoulder. You did not come back empty-handed. You never made a wasted move. And CNC machinery, for people who are gifted like you, okay, who know how to develop that process, are constantly looking for how do you make the machinery not make any wasted moves. And people who have that skill like you do aren't people who waste a lot of moves for themselves going through the day. I'm always walking with something in my hand that, rather than make it a special trip later to move it from point A to point B, since I'm going there now and I'm empty-handed, take an extra 15 seconds, pick it up and move it now, because I won't have 8 minutes later to do that. And it's a thought process that you develop. I don't see that same critical thinking skills being instilled in our children today.
Well, the tool belt. That made the carpenter more efficient, because he didn't have to go back to his toolbox every time, take the hammer back, get the saw, take the saw back, get the level, take the level back, get the hammer. So at some point the tool belt was a innovation of efficiency.
I had a young apprentice on a job, and he was working with his mouth and his pockets and holding a hammer between his knees, and holding the measuring tape in a shirt pocket, and holding nails in his mouth so his hands would be free, or his pockets. It was his first day on the job. He was working with a guy that was very frustrated by every time he had to do anything, he had to wait for the kid to catch up with his juggling act to hand him something. He had to free up a hand somehow to hand him something, put something down, walk back and go pick it up, and all this and that. And so the more skilled person that was working for me was telling me how frustrated they were with the kid. So I went to the kid after lunch, and I said, "Jimmy," I said, "by the way, we have a company policy here." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah. Do you know we pay 50 cents an hour more to anybody that owns a nail apron?" "Really?" "Yeah." "No, you're just picking on me because I'm the new guy." "No, it's true." So the guys overheard the conversation, and they're going, "Jimmy, I make more than 50 cents an hour more than you. It's because I went and bought a nail apron." The kid had a nail apron the next day. But, that's part of the fun of the trades. We pick on people that way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top of the hour break. Dan's time is limited with us, though it is gracious that he even made time for us this evening with all he has on his plate. So I'm going to take the top of the hour break a little bit early, so in the next section I have an extra minute or two with Dan before he has to go. And you are listening to American Patriot Radio. I love my tools, the radio show. And we'll be back in a few.
Okay, that concludes part one of our show, and our discussion of CNC machinery and lithography will continue in part two with our guest, Mr. Dan Rich from the original Oregon company, holder of many patents in the industry of computer-controlled laser technology. Also, I'm going to invite you to please click on like if this information is of help to you, and I'm going to invite you please to help us help 1 million people find high-paying jobs in the trades by giving us more credibility on YouTube, by clicking and subscribing on our channel, America's Blind Tradesman. Thanks for your help, and we'll see you in part two, coming up next.